Hello everyone and welcome back to the I'll Try That podcast. This week's episode we're going to be travelling to South Wales, to Newport, and we're going to be trying Tiny Rebel and a selection of their beers. And in the hop topic we're going to be looking and judging the latest beers that came out of the World Beer Awards 2020. The results are in and we will find out who won. And tantalising stuff.
But before all of that, I believe Simo has some news that he wants to tell us and that none of us are happy about.
Wow. Okay. So, it's big news. I'm not sure it's something I don't want to tell you, but I might be heading to the land down under.
Might be or will be. Tell us about what the details are about this.
Okay. So obviously, living in the times we're in at the moment, it's not always easy to say what's going to happen in the future, but I have a plane that is supposed to take me to Australia. And to get on said plane, I've had to get travel exemption and a visa. And in order to get that, I've also had to do an 80-page essay and gone back to uni for a month in order to prove I can teach in Australia. So other than that, it's been a absolutely easy breezy time. But yeah, so at the moment, I'm potentially allowed in the country.
So
yes, Dravell.
So you said you had to go back to university to say that you can teach in Australia. Does that mean you had to put an Australian accent on so then the students would understand you?
No, I just had to prove I could do teaching assessment in my British accent. And I'm guessing it's because they needed to understand that I was able to be understood whilst in Australia as a British person. I think that's mainly the main process.
But I think Rich makes a really good point. If you want to be understood in Australia, surely you should have to put on an Australian accent on. So how would you have done that if you that was a prerequisite? How are you going to start? What are you going to open up to your new students in Australia as?
I'll be like, "G'day, mate. Welcome to Australia. Let's jump on a kangaroo." That's what I'll start with. That's perfect right there.
Well, I mean, I think you've won. I think that all those teenage kids that you're going to be teaching in Australia are going to be like, yes, I like this person already. They're not going to rip into you at all. Because you said, welcome to Australia. They're already in Australia. They're Australian. That's all they know.
But they don't know the Australia I know. So, that's it. I'm creating their own version of Australia as I teach. I'm like, sup, bros? And they're like, they'll be like, this teacher's hanging out the koala bear, I don't know what they say because I haven't been to Australia yet, so who knows the
No, that's not false. That's false. You have been to Australia.
No, but as in I haven't been in Australian education, so I have no idea what the slang is. As in the slang in the UK could be highly different. As in the fact that the kids say dank and stuff in the education I'm in, they might not think dank is as dank it is.
So I figured out, isn't there the TV show Summer Heights High, which I feel encapsulates Australian high school culture? You should probably just watch that back to back and you'll be fine.
Oh, is that how it works? Just watch okay, yeah. I mean, at the moment, I am leaving, but it does not change the fact that I'll be part of this podcast, obviously. We'll make it work. It will just may mean that you two have to wake up at inaudible times to do the recordings.
And I think both Rich and I are very excited by that prospect of waking up at 2:00 in the morning to start the podcast recording.
I figured out it just means that you have to start drinking alcohol at 10 a.m. That's basically what it means.
Well, we do what we need to do for the podcast, obviously, to keep bringing it back to the listeners. But obviously, for both Rich and I, obviously, to lose one of our best friends to the other side of the world, quite literally the other side of the world, obviously very sad about that. But we cannot be happier for you with you taking this jump and taking this leap with your fantastic girlfriend, Jack. And, damn that she's Australian, but oh my God, you're going to have a great time over there in Australia. And we could not be happier for you.
Also, I'm just saying, perfect chance for a holiday, boys.
We will be out there with bells on them. And if anything, for the podcast, it creates great opportunity to actually start doing some more Australian beer reviews rather than like fake Australian beer reviews like Foster's, and we can start talking about actual beers, and we can get some kind of actual local knowledge going on in the Australian culture, because we know that craft beer is huge over in Australia, as in most countries. So we're very excited for you. Sorry to see you go, of course, but we're looking forward to seeing you out there and to continue the podcast with you.
So I feel it's probably move on to our hot topic, which is all about the Beer Awards 2020. And of course, I know all of us here are looking forward to the Beer Awards for 2021, but we've got to go back a bit and hit up the 2020 Beer Awards, which, Joe, I believe you have some of the results for us to chat about.
I do, and as you can, everyone's been waiting with bated breath for the award winners of the 2020 Beer Awards. The results are out. We're ready to go. These are actually, I mean, if I'm honest, for the Beer Awards goes, these are the prestigious ones. These are the ones you want to win. These are the awards that if you win them, you will definitely be you earn the right to put the World Beer Awards logo and the 2020 winner or whatever year winner on your website, on your cans. You get to do so much more with this. So this is a really big deal. I know we're kind of trivializing it a little bit, but it's actually such a big deal. So I will give, right from the first start, we've just come out of January. By the time we're recording this, by the time this comes out, this is probably very much further away from January. But by the time we just come out of this, I will give you guys a choice each. What do you think was voted as the 2020 World Beer Awards world's best flavoured low alcoholic drink?
Ooh. World's best. So this goes back to, we've tried a lot of low alc in the past couple of months or so. So my favourite one is going to be the Ghost Ship, the low alcoholic Ghost Ship we did. I think that's been my favourite out of all the ones I've tried. That one's been my favourite.
I'm going to go with, just because Joe's ranted about it so much, the Heineken 00.
Right, great. But I think both very good contenders to that one. I like both of those ones. I haven't actually tried the Adnams Ghost Ship, but it's on my list to try it because of how much you've raved about it, Rich. But this one that won the world's best low alcoholic, I have tried and I did review it and raved about it. It's the Big Drop Galactic Milk Stout. World's best low alcoholic flavored beer.
On Big Drop, aren't Big Drop basically a non-alcoholic company?
That's all they do is non-alcoholic. So they are owning that category. They are all about no alcoholic, and they have won. They have the beer that is the world's best 2020 low alcoholic beer.
Well, that's it. If you're gonna only brew non-alcoholic beverages, you would hope to be at least a contender in that category, and to win it, fair play.
Okay, so we're going to move on now to the world's best lager. Now, obviously, with each one of these beers and each one of these kind of categories, there are so many different subcategories. So, you have the world's best international lager, the world's best Helles or München lager. You have the world's best Dortmunder lager. There's so many different ones. But what do you think was the world's best light lager?
Bud Light, for its just generic taste and that everybody seems to thoroughly enjoy it, and it's got light in the name.
I'm going to go for Michelob Ultra, just because I really liked it.
Interesting. So you're both wrong, but I like the choices. Light and light, very much on the proposition. So this one is actually called Karhu, and it's owned by Sinebrychoff, which is the Finnish subsidiary of Carlsberg. And this is their Karhu beer, and it's 0.0%. There is a Karhu, which is obviously the full flavour, as Rich, I think you dubbed the full fat. But this is their 0.0, and it doesn't. I'm not sure why they won this, and they're a non-alcoholic beer, because surely they should have been in a contention for the low alc. Maybe they were as well.
Well, otherwise I would have put 3-star in if we're going for that non-alcoholic low lager.
Yeah, well, this is just as they call it, a good example of how a 0% lager with the balance and the bitterness at the end. Okay, we have another topic for you. We have just talked about wheat beers. So what do you think is the world's best Belgian-style wit beer? From all those Belgian-style wit beers that we obviously know about.
Erdinger?
That's
German.
not
We
Belgian.
literally just did an episode on it.
It's not.
Bro, I've got no clue. The only wheat beer I know is Erdinger.
So I know it. I'll stop you there, guys. I know it's on the tip of your tongues, but actually it's Unibrow, and it's the Blanche de Chambly.
Of course.
Oh, of course.
Of course.
Sugar.
The
Damn.
Unibrow.
So anyway, case in point, but also taste in point that also works. The World Beer Awards. There's a lot of different categories, a lot of different subcategories, and there are a lot of beers that get entered into it. And I'm just very pleased that we might start looking at World Beer Awards website more often for trying beers that we need to try and go and get. Because if they are rated and they've won awards in this, then they are obviously very good. Right, let's
The suit of happiness.
Right, let's get into the pursuit of happiness. So this week in the pursuit of happiness, we are travelling to Newport in Wales, the UK, and we are talking about Tiny Rebel. Now, Tiny Rebel started in 2012 by brothers-in-law Bradley Cummings and Gareth Williams. Now, Gareth Williams sounds like the most Welsh name I can think of. If you were to say, name a Welsh name, Gareth Williams, or maybe Aled Jones would spring to mind. But they first and foremost started out as an urban tap room dedicated to craft beer. So they were obviously like a bar that was bringing in specific, different types of beers and doing it itself. And then which they branched out to create its own, started to brew beers themselves by about 2015. So, I like that idea that they were understanding from the very first and foremost how to sell beer and how to make it, get nice beers in and what would it take to make a nice beer. And then they started up making their own beer. And that's how Tiny Rebel kind of started about.
I suppose it's nice to know that they were beer aficionados before they delved into the beer creating business, because knowing beer is a big part of it, because you can be like, we're just going to give it a whirl, give it a go, we'll try some homebrew. But to understand that they liked beer and they had was it like a bar to start with, you said, Joe?
Yeah, well, one bar, and then it became multiple bars.
Well, that's it. Yeah, they had a bar to start with, which I can feel their bar. I wish I'd been there at the start just to see what beers they were introducing, what they were trying, because I reckon after trying a few of their beers now, I reckon they've had some fantastic beers they would have introduced.
So I never really heard of them until we decided this podcast.
I spilled beer on my table and I'm drinking it up.
I've only known them as like a company you can get their beers from, like wacky internet kind of collections. I never knew that they were available through supermarkets, but I actually bought this one because both Joe and Rich told me that they were available in Morrison's. Well, no, not Morrison's, Sainsbury's. And that I was like, oh my God, I didn't realize that this sort of company, which were so rare in my eyes, were actually now in supermarkets. So that opened my eyes to how big they're getting, because I always feel that you getting into a supermarket is a big deal.
Well, that's it. Because when I was so when I brought these, there was a whole bit in Sainsbury's just dedicated to Tiny Rebel, which is why I now have 4 of their beers out in front of me, and they were selling a relatively large proportion of their offering, which is really good to see.
So I think that Tiny Rebel's an interesting character, an interesting brewery to look at, because as you said, they've been around not that long. They've kind of started to feel like they're becoming more of an emphasis here in the UK. I found it quite interesting. They haven't really been making the headlines in the same way like a Brewdog will do, or some of those other beers. They don't really do too many collaborations with other beers. They just seem to be making their own stuff. They're more, here's our beers. They're craft beers, but this is what we do. So they haven't gone down the Northern Monk or the Siren aspect of things, where they're trying to branch themselves out by doing collaborations, working with other breweries. They just make their beers and they sell their beers. So it's form and function. But what I found quite interesting, a little fact that I just saw right now, is that in 2013, they exported to Sweden the company's pale ale of Fubar, and that was blocked by the Swedish government on the grounds that the beer's label was contrary to Swedish government guidelines on war imagery. So you guys might recognize the pop culture reference of FUBAR. It might be very true for this, but actually, if you think back to like the film Saving Private Ryan, there's a phrase of FUBAR, which basically just means like something that, you know, a situation that you can't explain or you just have to do it, whatever, you know, which might happen in war. It's called FUBAR. And I can only imagine, because I haven't got the imagery, they won't show on the online what the imagery was of that war depicting image that Sweden government decided you cannot have it like listed. But it might have just been like FUBAR matched with some sort of like war graphic or something depicting a battle scene or maybe a soldier or something, and they decided that wasn't the case. But that's quite interesting in itself, that they've obviously come up against international guidelines when trying to export their beer.
So just to go down to like along Tiny Rebels advertising and what they've done, they've also had problems can design with the tiny bear, and as you can look at all their cans, very vibrant, very things, and we talked about with Salt, as I said, but they've had issues with complaints where they've had to change their designs because it says it looks too much like an energy drink and too much kind of like engaging and entertaining for children on their cans.
Interesting. So there's been multiple occasions where they've had to change designs, or they think about their designs differently because of what they're kind of putting out there. And I've actually just looked up the FUBAR Pale Ale, and it's a grenade. It's an infographic it's like a graphic of a grenade with FUBAR written through it. So yeah, I mean, very much war imagery, you know, through and through. But I think going back to like Tiny Rebel in itself, their graphic in itself, what is their logo, looks like a beaten up teddy bear.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen this? The illustration side? So it's really interesting. And you get from the name from Tiny Rebel that they're here to they're a craft brewer. They're here to kind of push boundaries. You know, they're not hitting in with some sort of norms, but that's a really interesting depiction or thing to kind of like tie yourself in with, and to try and help people understand who you are, is a beaten up teddy bear graphic. So,
I mean, on the can I've got, which is a Cali Pale, they've also got the surfboard and palm trees, and then they've got like a bike, and then they've got like a sign that's like saying no spray cans or no graffiti, and then on the back, I'm not sure if this is the same for you guys. They have like quotes saying like, "We have one rule: never just make vanilla ice cream," or kick back and watch the world go by. Tiny Rebel.
So when you said we're going to do Tiny Rebel on the podcast, I decided to try and find as many as I can. But so right now I've got the Club Tropical, the Cali Pale, the Electric Boogaloo, and the Shakedown, and I've got them all on the go right now, so I can try them all for this podcast. So yeah, I've got a fair few bit going on.
I have the Cali Pale, and I have the Club Tropica, and I have the Club Tropica non-alc as well to try. But I would say that I have had the Electric Boogaloo. Is that one that you have? You just say
I've got
you have
that
the Electric
right
Boogaloo? So I've had the Electric Boogaloo before and could not speak highly enough about it. I really enjoyed it. So give us your feelings on the Electric Boogaloo.
So I've been sipping the Electric Boogaloo through the whole time we've been doing the podcast, and that's I suppose the first time I've kind of taken a big old gulp and a little bit sip. And it is delightful. I can taste the IPA coming over, but then I can also taste the passion fruit that is kind of like washing over as well, which is what it's meant to be. It's a passion fruit. Oh, sorry, NEPA. It's that New England IPA, that one that I tried with the Salt. But it's kind of crushed. The passion fruit is delightful, and it is a lovely drink to have.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Electric Boogaloo. I mean, the designs themselves. I mean, Simo mentioned earlier on that sorry, was that you that mentioned about how they've had they had to change it because of kids being kids?
Yeah.
So I think design-wise, I mean, as you said, Rich, they've had to go through trying to change because they look very childish and they could be very appealing to children. But Electric Boogaloo hits that on the head. You know, that is bright pink. It has their logo, which is this beaten up teddy bear. You know, kind of like in the middle of it. And it's quite large as well. I think the teddy bear's got some colour on it, if I remember correctly, if I look back as I can. So it's very colourful. It's got this teddy bear picture on it. And, you know, it's called Electric Boogaloo, which is quite a fun phrase, you know, in any sense of the imagination. And I have the CLWB. So you referred to it as a Club Tropic, and it's the CLWB Tropica. So CLWB is how it's referred to. And it is interesting. It's light blue, baby blue, but a very similar design to the rest of the Tiny Rebel designs. But it's got this kind of like streaky kind of color to it, which is white lines or silver cans, because it comes on the can version, but they usually would be white. Have you tried this tropical IPA yet?
Is that is the Club Tropical? So yeah, I've also got that on the go, and it's more the initial taste is wonderful, but it does taste tropical, which is you get the tropical juice that comes across, and yeah, many people make the tropical juice. That's the kind of flavour I get, as well as also the usual IPA effects that come across. I do get that tropical hit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the fact that remains that this is definitely a very tropical feeling in that it's got mango, it's got pineapple in there, it's a very golden, hazy beer, 5.5% ABV. But how they're putting the beer, they use basically syrup or kind of like a mango, pineapple syrup or tropical flavouring to put in there, which is really nice. I do like it. Obviously, that increases the amount of like sugars that would be in this beer. But it's really tasty. The taste that comes through is something very delightful. It definitely transports me to trying like on a beach of some sort. It's as it says on the tin, it's Tropica. It feels and tastes very tropical. So with the Club Tropica non-alc, like from the nose, you get that kind of essence of they've made a beer and then they've taken it away. It feels a little bit vacuous. It has a smell to it, but it's nothing close to the full fat, as you'd call it, Rich, of Club Tropica, which has this kind of like very mango, pineapple-y smell and taste to it.
Down to that analogy again, where they've brewed the beer, but it's not quite all there, as though you've had some squash, and you've drunk it, and then you've had a glass of water, but you've got a little bit of squash left over.
So I'm really pleased that it doesn't have that. It is a lot more like you've intentionally made a glass of squash with this version. Like there was definitely, it's not full, like it's not like a juice level of flavour, but it is certainly not a kind of a very watered, you've only just you have unintentionally made this squash. This is definitely a squash on the squash level of non-alc versus full fat. This has got a nice flavour to it. You are starting to get that kind of tropical vibes to it, but I mean, in comparison to like a Capri Sun, which is the only tropical juice drink I can think of, or a Bongo Bongo, it's kind of drink which has very flavoured things. It's not there. It isn't as full flavoured as those, but this is it's quite a tasty non-alcoholic version of a very tropical drink. And I think the only kind of notable thing really to kind of say about this is that design-wise, it looks exactly the same as the Club Tropica full fat, but they've reversed out the colours. So the Club Tropica full fat is, as we said, that light blue with white or kind of silver as the kind of like the where the graphic design is, whereas the non-alcoholic version of it is reversed. So it's mostly white with a pop of that light blue.
But they haven't changed the name, have they, at all, really?
No, it's exactly the same, but it's called non-alc. And so I would say, for that matter, our whole rule of thumb, isn't it, is that unless you can make a non-alcoholic beer taste exactly like the beer that you're naming after, that's not a good shout.
So I was going to say, so what I've got from Tiny Rebel in general, taking away from the non-alcoholic and stuff, from the four that I'm tasting in front of me right now, they all are very quite sweet. They're a very kind of almost, I'm like candy-ish sort of flavour. If I was going to go it'd be the pick and mix of beer sort of thing. That they all taste quite sweet. They're quite nice, but they are in general very, very nice across the board.
I'm amazed. I'm pleased that you talked about sweetness there, because looking at their list of beers, especially, they have a whole range of non-alc. This is just one of their many non-alc beers. They have other beers called Rhubarb and Custard, Space Cake, Party Hard. Like, it's very juvenile. It's very, like, kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of candy-ish, as you said, Rich. It's kind of like sweetness is kind of like they're building into it. And knowing that, looking at their designs, that's exactly what it looks like. It looks like a kid in a candy shop, but obviously a beer candy shop, which is probably a lot of beer drinkers like
fantasy.
Fantastic dream is having being in a candy shop full of beer. But it translates down to the liquid itself in that it's quite sweet. But in saying that, what do we feel about because they have a Cali Pale Ale, and as we know, Cali Pale Ale is something new that we've just recently got introduced to. What's our overall thought of this Cali Pale?
I think this is sweet. I think it is. It calls itself a juicy pale ale or juicy pale. I do think it's sweet, and I do think that you can taste the mango. Like, I feel like they do push the kind of sugary side. Is that the right kind of way to call it? It classes itself as a juicy pine mango.
So the only pale ale, the Californian pale ale that I had was the Siren, and that was not sweet. That wasn't referring to itself as pineapple. It just referred to itself as like a kind of a nice warm, like kind of smooth. Whereas this is not really smooth in that sense. Like, it goes down well as a pale ale does, but it's quite tart.
Yeah, definitely. You're completely on the money there. As in, like, it's something that I feel like when you're drinking it, it really hits your lips, and it's like, ooh.
So I've just gone back to trying the Club Tropica, and that's actually way too sweet for me now. Like, I've just been hit with a rush of syrup and sugar, and it's just it was tasty to start off with, but I'm finding it a little bit sickly now. I've gone about halfway through the can. Don't know if you found the same thing, Rich.
I was going to say, have you guys tried the Shakedown that Tiny Rebel have done? No, so I'm currently have 4 of them in front of me, and I've got the Shakedown Electric Boogaloo, the Cali Pale Ale, and the Club Tropical, which is, I would say, a large selection of the Tiny Rebel brewing that's going on. And I'd say that the Shakedown and the Cali Pale Ale are very similar in their taste and what they're trying to put across.
But as in, do you like them?
Well, I don't have the biggest sweet tooth in the world. So in general, Tiny Rebel isn't appealing to my taste buds like in my general flavour and taste. But like the Shakedown and Cali Pale Ale are both very nice. And so is the Club Tropical and Electric Boogaloo. I can't deny nothing that I'm trying right now is horrible or untasty sort of thing. It's just not to my taste buds.
So the way I kind of feel about it is with the Cali Pale that I've got is that I'm enjoying it, but I just don't think I'd have too many of them. It's something that I feel like I could have one of and be like, do you know what, that was a really enjoyable experience. But I think if I had too many, I'd be not sugared out, but I would be sweetened out, let's say, because the flavour is very strong, and you do get that, like, the sweetness to every single, like, sip.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. If I'm honest, I'm enjoying the difference that Tiny Rebel is offering in the beers, but I'm not sure if I'd make them a staple of my kind of like beer consumption. I just think this is a really nice alternative, but it won't become a staple for me. And I say that with like heavy heart, in that because I've just ordered, a good amount of beer from them, because I was like, I enjoyed this, the one that I tried, the Electric Boogaloo. I then went and ordered online more beers from them.
They're not sessionable for me. I think that's what you're trying to get across, Joe, is like you can have them and they're enjoyable, but you have to almost mix it in with other beers, because I feel like I could, if I had one, I'd be like, oh, this is quite nice. But I think if I had 4 in a row, I'd be like, dude, I'm done.
Because they're so sweet, I question how much sugar is actually in them and how much sugar I'm putting in my body. It makes me think that I'm consuming teaspoons and teaspoons of sugar, even though I'm sure it's like a syrup. I'm sure it doesn't have sugar in it, but I'm just like, oh, my brain is thinking sugar. That's bad. Why are you drinking sugar?
Well, that's it, because as a diabetic, consuming these and the way they taste concerns me.
It's interesting as a company goes, and I think they're interesting. I mean, I will happily wear, when my T-shirt for Tiny Rebel comes across, I will definitely wear it because I think they're a really fascinating brewery.
I think it's something you have to try because I do think it's slightly different because the sweetness is something I don't think you always get in other companies. So I think even if you're not sure, it's worth a punt.
I've never come across a company that's doing an electric Boogaloo, who's doing a Tropica. I think they are doing something very unique in that setting. There are so many beers that they're doing, which is different to other companies, but they're very much on the sweeter end. You'll enjoy Tiny Rebel. Like I definitely am not enjoying Tiny Rebel.
Yeah.
I enjoy Tiny Rebel.
That's it.
But I feel like the sweetness is really overpowering me a little bit now that we're, a couple of drinks in.
Well, that's it. And Tiny Rebel does taste good. I'm not taking that away from them in any way, shape, or form. It is a pleasant tasting beverage. It is everything that I've tried I'm not offended. I think is nice, and I would drink again, but not on a regular basis.
Also, numbers wise, on Twitter, they have 45,000 followers, and on Instagram they have 91,000 followers. They are intriguing. So I tried one over the winter period, which was a marshmallow stout. It was delicious. It was really tasty. They're a really nice kind of one-off, or a really nice kind of like on an occasion drink, but I'm not sure if I'd make this part of my regular routine. And that's all we have time for this week's episode of the I'll Try That podcast. And so from me, Joe,
Rich,
And Simo.
Goodbye. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram,
Twitter,
And watch us on YouTube.
Goodbye now. Always drink responsibly, and if you or anyone else needs some help, go to drinkaware.co.uk for more information.